welcome back. As we earlier said, we're going to be talking about the Arab-American summit that is taking place in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, today, and also due to be attended by His Excellency, the Head of State, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The upcoming summit is being hosted by Saudi Arabia, as we all know. Of course, leaders of the GCC, and also attended by the U.S. President Joe Biden. We're going to be shedding a comprehensive look over that particular summit, and we're very delighted to be having with us live here Dr. Hassan Wageeh, is a professor of international relations. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning to you.
First of all, we need to talk about the aim of this summit today. I mean, the objectives of this summit.
Very good. You know, when you are talking about the objectives, you are talking about how each party has already named, framed the name.
Labeled.
Labeled, very good term, yeah, that's labeling. Yes, in the Arab partners, and in Saudi Arabia in particular, called it the Summit for Security and Development. But Biden, after agreeing on this, he made his own label, which is integrating Israel in the area. And also, when he was leaving the United States, he wrote a piece in the Washington Post trying to justify his presence and his trip to the ordinary American citizen. So it could be under the kitchen politics meeting. You know, kitchen politics in America is a terminology which means that I care about the everyday life of Americans. The price of gas, the price of treatment, medical treatment, how to live. You know, this is what they call kitchen table politics. It is a term there. So actually, these are the different labels or the different names, and consequently, you can understand the agenda of each one.
The agenda of each one. There are different parts, of course. There is the American side, and you have the GCC Council with all the Arab and Gulf members, and you have Saudi Arabia as a totally separated part, and of course the very strong presence of Egypt,
right?
Which they have gave a big space to. And they are preparing and planning and realizing the important and the gravity or the importance of the presence of Egypt as one of the leading roles in the region. With all of that, if you like to elaborate on each role.
Of course, when it comes to Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the other Arab countries, yes, we have already witnessed organizing meetings before the meeting with President Biden, so as to find a common identification ground, which is very clear for every analyst, which is about, yes, we can have strategic relations with the United States and other countries, but we have also our strategic relations with the Russians and with the Chinese. And
this is the Egyptian part.
The Egyptian and even Saudi Arabia, all the Arab parts actually have this positive neutrality game. You know, like India. India is playing this game and this
positive neutrality.
Positive neutrality. You know, remember, you go back to Nasser's era and Nasser, Nehru, Tito. You remember all these old politicians and long time ago. I think Egypt politics in general aims at having balanced role. Egypt is a role country, by the way. So it has to balance its relations with all the parties involved in any crisis in the world. So I think the term is very important here. The agenda of the Arab partner could be subsumed under the title of let us have here, and that was a clear message directed to Biden before and during and I think after, that we don't mind having excellent relationship. It's very good to have communication and face-to-face, because in any crisis, by the way, there is something called, when it comes to managing of crises, crisis sense-making.
Crisis sense-making.
Or meaning-making.
What does that, if you'd like to give us a definition.
Yeah, sure, thank you. Actually, sense making and meaning making is to face the others with their real agenda and to be assertive about it. So as when you have these deliberations of different agendas, you can try to spot the identification ground by all these agendas. This is a technical term in crisis management. And this helps in crisis termination. And this also means correcting mistakes. And you can't remember that Biden himself mentioned that I did mistakes regarding the vacuum in the Middle East, so I'm here back to it. Of course, he tried to mend the things in a way, his own way, when he also made mistakes when it comes to leaving the Palestinians during their tough economic situation. So he came with aid for...
He came with aid already.
Yeah, and he visited as a symbolic gesture East Jerusalem and with no presence from the Israeli side. So, and
but he also made it clear that talking about realizing two different separate states and realizing Jerusalem as the capital is not in the agenda at all for the current being.
But the most problematic thing is a contradiction in discourses. When he mentioned this, he said, but it is far-fetched. And when he was asked about East Jerusalem as the capital, he said he did not comment. And also, one of the things that really was not favorite at all, but it really made Arab peoples in an angry state when he said, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a Jew, but to be a Zionist. And he said, I am a Zionist. And I think this is a very insensitive statement to the Arab public, because actually we all the time try to separate between two things, between having Islam, Christianity, Judaism is fine. But Judaism, Zionism for the entire world is expansionism, is expansion of the state of Israel to the Nile, from the Nile to the Euphrates. It is associated with very, very negative collocational terms in the Arab world.
And very biased policy also.
And very biased, extremely biased. And I think if he wants to correct his mistakes, it's very good of him to say so. But I think it is correcting this kind of terminology that really keep people away from getting real, authentic cooperation on the people's level.
But do you think he said so because we totally understand people who are very much aware of the policies inside the United States and in the American administration, that he was giving such a praise? It wasn't just a slip of a tongue. It was a phrase that was very, precisely calculated, that reflected his keenness on preserving majority of votes and, inside some states, especially in New York, and economic, empowerment and stuff like this, which is dominated by
yeah, but when we are talking
Zionists.
about authentic interest, this is a very individualistic oriented interest. But when you have authentic solutions, de-escalation, and let us go back to the sense making and meaning making, which you really you elaborated on it with your comment.
Right.
But let me elaborate more. If you are talking about sense making and meaning making in a crisis, which is being studied in academia and in real life, actually when we try to apply it to the current crisis, yes, you'd like to correct your mistakes. Very good. Thank you very much, sir. But how about that we can try to do, because sense making is associated with another term, crisis termination. What is the crisis? Crisis termination. The negotiators should work on terminate the crisis. Which crisis? The global crisis. Now the Russian, Ukrainian crisis is a global crisis. So I think that there are mistakes being conducted, and I think correcting mistakes is a good way to terminate the crisis. Like for instance, when it comes to what they call the economic sanctions on Russia. No, it was an economic war that really hurt themselves before hurting the Russians, and hurting the Russians and others, and hurting us as peaceful people who would like stability, security, and who would like. So I think let us get to the core of the crisis. You have to go. The Europeans should correct their mistakes. The Americans should correct their mistakes. The Russians should correct their mistakes. You know, because this is the only way to terminate and to de-escalate. And I think the meeting in Jeddah with Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the Arab parties, I think let them be a force for mediating and terminating this crisis that really impacted us all, and avoid trying to say it is a military orientation, Arab NATO. No, no, no. The Arab public and the Arab politics, I think, should abstain from getting into that direction. But let us go to the root of the crisis to solve it, which is correcting mistakes.
You raised, by the way, you raised a very important point, which is the totally wrong decision or hasty decision that was taken when they thought of imposing sanctions against Russia because of the military confrontation and not the war, the military confrontation between Russia and
considered
Ukraine.
Not sanctions, it is really economic war.
Economic war,
so it's getting into war.
That fired back at Europe even more. Than they were targeting against Russia, and hurt. It was or affected damage even on the neighboring countries
and
or the
all over the world, and even us.
And that's why the Egyptian administration and the presidential spokesman said that probably President Abdel Fattah Sisi is going to be negotiating with the American administration. Inside this meeting, the food security, one of the main issues between the two presidents in the Jeddah summit, and the war in Ukraine, pointing out to topics like that, trying to sort out topics like that and realizing their mistakes. But the question here is that you have raised that particular professional definition or phrase about the crisis sense meeting. In order to establish such an idea or effect such a phrase or a definition or a conception like that, you need just to realize as a ground, realize or admit realities.
Yeah.
Or have any sense of realization for reality. If you do not realize realities, if the American administration do not admit their mistakes or realize the reality on the ground.
The authentic and real mistakes.
Exactly.
Right.
If each side is not admitting their mistakes and put it on the negotiating table and realize it honestly and transparently, nothing is going to be affected.
To change.
So
right.
How do you think that is going to work?
Yes, I think your point is quite clear and quite.
It sounds very nice, but
it sounds very nice. But you don't have to escape from reality. You have to be realistic, and you have to address the root of the crisis, not the surface level of the crisis.
Yeah, right now, excuse me, I'm going to intervene. Sure. President Abdel Fattah Sisi have arrived in Jeddah exactly now to attend the Just Security meeting or the meeting, the Arab-American meeting in Jeddah. Okay. Between the GCC countries or GCC council members, and also Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the US administration headed by President Joe Biden. He just arrived right now. If you like to elaborate more over what we were talking about, of course they are preparing to of course, they are preparing to hold some joint talks. Exactly, a press conference with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, as we can see. If you like to elaborate.
Yes, I think.
What is the significance of the start of the summit?
Because
what do you expect points to be raised during this press conference and this
joint talks? The most important thing is that the strategic cooperation with Saudi Arabia is very clear from the picture here now. He
said that he's heading to the Saudi Arabia, asking the Saudis to pump more oil.
Yes.
He has said it, and he was very forthcoming. I mean, I'm talking about President Biden.
But the people in Saudi Arabia are quite aware of what the world is seeing now, and oil plus, OPEC plus,
right.
which they should return to. OPEC plus means that they should return and take into consideration also the Russian interest.
As we can see that Prince Salman is welcoming the Egyptian delegation.
Yes. And,
right.
So I think that, yes, this brotherly relation is important, and having unified agenda is very important. And I think they would gonna raise the terms that we have already mentioned about positive neutrality. Yes, we can go deep into strategic relations with the United States, no problem. But so we have our strategic relations with Russians and Chinese.
This term of this political term, it's a very important term, by the way. Revolutionary term. I hope it works. But positive neutrality is agreed on by all the GCC Council members and Egypt. I mean, there is a prior acknowledgement of this political term.
Yes, I think generally yes, but you have in certain issues different perspectives.
Or is it just a modern knowledge of policy?
Or just what?
A modern knowledge of I mean, modern policy, like the win-win situation. Like
it has to be win-win, win-lose, and the zero-sum games really led the world to nowhere. And even yourself, you know, there is another terminology, which is managing by crisis or managing the crisis. So if you manage...
What is the difference?
Managing by crisis, I can go for war to make a crisis and to do something and to enforce, for instance, change of the world order as input in mind.
Like what happened in Iraq, for example.
In Iraq and in several places, the Israelis have been doing all kinds of zero-sum games to change the situation, and they are still occupying Arab countries till now, and they have to know that when it comes to normalization should not go for free, because again, there is a very important terminology, which is peace for land. And this is the Saudi Arabia initiative, by the way, for the two states, for implementing all international resolutions.
But earlier we have heard that Saudi Arabia have opened their airspace in to and from Israel.
These are called baby steps. It is not giant steps.
Immature steps?
Mature. Oh, yes, of course. I think it is baby steps. No, this term, baby steps, was mentioned by politicians during this crisis, by the way. They considered and they labeled that move as baby step, means it's a small step. It is not giant step. Why? Because Saudis,
foundation steps.
Yes, because you have to return back that. Let us have the Palestinian problem solved. Let us have two states. So if I give you an incentive, you should return that incentive, and you should not go for another war, for instance. No, you should go for peace. And for peace building, authentic peace building for the Palestinian people.
But watching the warm welcome that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the respect and grandeur of the Egyptian delegation, accompanied, of course, heading them is President, the head of the state, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It reflects a lot of values that makes us all proud. I mean, look at Egypt retaining its real leading role in the region, also received with warmth and respect by the Saudi part. And also, it reflects also the strong bond between the new administration in Saudi Arabia, represented in Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and the Egyptian administration. If you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
You know, the body language reflects a lot here.
Yes, and the way the gesture in receiving the Emir of Mecca received the Biden.
And also President Mohammed, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is a man of state.
Yeah.
He is a modern political man, and you know, he has very sophisticated political views.
Yes, that's correct, and I think that the cooperation between the two leaderships would definitely impact the Arab agenda for a far better future, inshallah, in all fields. It is not only in that particular situation, but it is strategic, it is ongoing. and it is for the sake of the entire area. And I think this is a very, very important meeting and very important strategic relations with Saudi Arabia, of course.
Right. Regardless of that particular Arab-American summit, which is very important, by the way, that came at also a very specific time. We're going also to talk about the choice of the time of this visit. But at the same time, let's talk about two major countries in the region. Egypt and Saudi Arabia. They have their leading roles. They have their common interests, and they have also their common threats and their common challenges. If you like to elaborate more over what comes to the best interest of both countries, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, out of that particular meeting or gathering.
Actually, it's a very, very long history between the two countries. You remember, I think even in the coverage of the crisis in the Western media, they went back to 1973 when King Faisal and the President Sadat were together in 1973 October Ramadan War. And remember this decisive stance by the Saudi to use oil and to use the oil as a weapon. And I think the whole history could repeat itself with different meaning and different words. Now Biden and the entire world is looking at this weapon again, the oil weapon.
And of course, and it always has been like that, and it will always be.
There is a very wise use of that to serve the Arab agenda and to serve the Saudi Arabia agenda itself. And when it comes to Egypt and Saudi Arabia, it is a long history of good, excellent relationship between the two peoples. A long time ago, and in many, many political events. And even in the Holy Quran, وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ, means that the Quran united the two geopolitical places into one thing. So we are extension to them and they are extension to us. So in all fields.
It goes without saying.
Yeah.
At this point, Professor Dr. Hassan Wageeh, Professor of International Relations, would like to thank you so much for coming over. And we're going to go to a short break and we'll come to continue the breakfast show, so stay with us.